But first, in our show last week, we spoke to the Conservative mayoral candidate Susan Hall. And this week, we're joined by the mayoral incumbent Sadiq Khan. Before we speak to the mayor, here's Johnny Harvey with an outline of his manifesto.
If re-elected for another 4 years, Sadiq Khan pledges to make London a fairer, safer, greener London. Making London fairer starts with housing. He says he will build at least 40,000 new council homes by the end of the decade. He will back renters, working with an incoming Labour government to deliver a new deal for renters in London and building rent control homes. And he will prioritise ending rough sleeping in the capital by 2030. His fairness strategy also includes extending free school meals for all primary school children for the next 4 years. Making London safer commits to placing 1,300 new neighbourhood police officers and police community support officers on London streets, as well as increased support to tackle violence against women and girls. He will invest more in youth clubs to provide 250,000 positive opportunities to young people to deter them from crime. And he will continue to drive reform across the Met to rebuild Londoners' trust. For transport, he will continue to freeze TfL fares for as long as economic conditions allow, and transform transport in Outer London, with a second Superloop bus route, as well as campaigning for the Bakerloo line extension, the West London Orbital and the DLR to Thamesmead. Finally, Khan reiterates his pledge to make London a net zero carbon city by 2030.
And Sadiq joins me now. Welcome to you. Great to have you on the programme.
Great to be here.
Let's start with the ULEZ expansion, which has proved extremely divisive. Official air quality data isn't out until after the election. If, when it is revealed, it proves not to have had any significant difference, would you scrap the extension?
Well, the decision to expand the ULEZ so it covers all of London was a difficult one, and the right one to do. None of us would allow our children to drink dirty water or our parents to drink dirty water, so our dirty air. The great news is we now know roadside emissions across London, including Outer London, are down by 50% in terms of nitrogen oxide. The great news is, whereas when I first became mayor, almost 500 schools in areas where the air was illegal, now less than 20. But let's wait and see what the evidence from TfL is. I'm confident it will show less particulate matter, less nitrogen dioxide, less nitrogen oxide, so Londoners can breathe cleaner air.
But if it doesn't, will it influence your decision about whether to keep it?
Of course, I always look at the evidence. I'm an evidence-based politician. I speak as a former lawyer. I'm confident from what we've seen so far that it's making a big difference. Look, when I was running for mayor in 2016, King's College said it would take 193 years for our air to be within lawful limits. It will be done by next year.
OK, so you are willing to commit to possibly scrapping it if the evidence doesn't prove it's effective?
I always look at the evidence. The great news, though, is massive, massive progress in central London, in London and all across London. And the really good news now is 19 out of 20 cars seen driving across our city, including Outer London, 95% are compliant, don't pay a penny, yet see the benefits of cleaner air. OK,
let's talk about paper mile. It's something that's been a big feature of this election. You're denying you want to bring it in, but you have spent £20 million on research into it. Also, in the last election, you said you wouldn't extend the ULEZ zones. How can voters trust you on this?
Let's deal with both those issues. So the money spent in relation to paper mile was a continuation of a policy begun by Boris Johnson in his mayor's transport strategy. I've cancelled any work being done on paper mile. I've made sure the Commissioner understands that as long as I'm mayor, no paper mile. It's not going to happen. So anybody who says it is scaremongering and lying. In relation to the ULEZ, I was quite clear in my manifesto in 2021 in relation to keeping all options open. I've made it clear in my manifesto this time, no paper mile.
OK, TfL, you've frozen fares until 2025, but critics say that the cost of actual travel cards and the daily and weekly cap are all set to actually rise by 5.1%, and they've accused you of just electioneering over this issue.
Well, Londoners know in the 8 years before I became mayor, fares went up by 42%. In 5 of the last 8 years, I've frozen them, so they're down by 21% versus inflation. We have the hopper fare, unlimited bus travel in an hour, bus and tram, cheapest bus fares in the country. And Londoners know, look, as long as I'm mayor, I'll either freeze fares or keep them as low as possible. My frustration is the privatised train operating companies have fares that are far more expensive than TfL. The really good news, we could have later on this year a Labour mayor working with the Labour government. We're going to nationalise all those privatised companies. I could be running those as well. They will see the benefits of my fare freeze too.
You've no idea whether or not there'll be a Labour government?
That's why I'm excited about the possibility. May the 2nd is first half, potential Labour mayor. general election, second half, potential Labour government. Only once in the history of our great city has there been a Labour mayor and a Labour government working together. We won the Olympics, secured funding for Crossrail. In 1 year alone, built 8,000 council homes. Just imagine what we could do with Keir Starmer in number 10 and me in City Hall.
Let's talk about crime. As Mayor, you are also Police and Crime Commissioner. The numbers when it comes to knife and gun crime are stark, both up by 20% last year, meaning on average 40 knife offences were committed every day in the capital. Parents are scared to let their kids out on the streets. What would you say to them about what you'll do differently in the next 4 years to bring those numbers down?
The safety of Londoners is the one issue that keeps me up at night time. I was 11 years a Member of Parliament, 8 years the Mayor of London. I've met too many bereaved parents or victims of crime. Despite massive cuts in policing budgets over the last 14 years, we lost £1 billion, 32% from City Hall. We've doubled the funding in our police service, being tough on crime, 1,300 more police. If I win again, 1,300 more police, but also tough on the complex causes of crime too: deprivation, poverty, alienation, lack of opportunity. And we lost, before I became mayor, hundreds of youth clubs, hundreds of youth workers. I've invested in youth clubs, after-school clubs, mentoring. What you've seen since I've been mayor, despite massive cuts in police funding from central government, homicides down, gun crime down, those injured with a knife below 25 down, burglaries down. The ONS said you're less likely to be the victim of violence in London. The ONS said less likely to be injured through violence in London. Still too high, though. Yeah. And that's why, if we get later on this year a Labour government working with a Labour mayor, we could be working together. And what I say to Londoners is this: for the last 8 years, I've been rowing against the tide of a Tory government. Imagine sailing with the winds of a Labour government at my back.
Yeah, but the figures do show knife and gun crime up compared to last year, 20%. Policing Minister Chris Philp says that knife crime has gone up in London because you've dialed down stop and search. He says that's really effective in tackling knife crime. Is that fair?
I disagree with both the Conservative candidate running to be mayor and the policing minister. The Conservative candidate running to be mayor thinks the black community has a problem with crime. She wants to increase stop and search. That will mean more black young men criminalised by the police. Look, stop and search is a valuable tool used sensibly by the police. How can a politician tell the police to stop and search somebody when there's no reasonable suspicion to do so? Londoners should worry about a Tory mayor who thinks the black community's got a problem with crime, who wants to massively increase stop and search. Just imagine the consequences of doing so.
So you mentioned one of your solutions is increasing the number of police officers by 1,300. You've already missed your recruitment target over the past year by 1,000. How are you going to rectify that, given that it's dependent on a Labour government, as you said, and then not just a Labour government, but also growth within that economy that they are hoping to create?
So in the last 14 years in London, because of government cuts, we've lost thousands of officers, thousands of police staff. 76 police stations were closed down before I became mayor. From City Hall, we've doubled the funding in the police. 1,300 more police officers are now on the streets because of our funding. 500 PCSOs funding because of our funding. If I win on May the 2nd, I'm promising with Yvette Cooper 1,300 more police, but also, more importantly, youth clubs have an investment. After-school clubs have an investment, mentors have an investment, being tough on crime, but as importantly, tough on the complex causes of crime too.
There have been pro-Palestinian marches nearly every weekend for the past 6 months in central London, with many Jewish community groups saying it's not safe. They don't feel safe to be out on the streets as Jews. Some calling for the Met chief to go, Mark Rowley, over this. Do you think that they are being policed correctly, these marches, and should they be allowed to continue?
But I think one of the cornerstones of our democracy is lawful protest. It's really important that we understand the decision whether protests take place should be operational decisions taken by the police. Just imagine if I, as a politician, dictated to the police which protests can be allowed and which can't. What's next? Me telling the police who to arrest, who to charge, who to prosecute. These are operational decisions based upon the Public Order Act. The police do an incredibly difficult job. I support them. But I make this point, which is really important. Protest must be lawful, peaceful and safe. And I say to those protesters who may be acting on the right side of the law, just be cognizant that your language is inadvertently scaring our friends, neighbours and colleagues who are Jewish. That's why, understand, once the conflict's over, God willing, we've got to go back to being friends, neighbours and colleagues.
OK, let's talk about housing. You say you've smashed all your government housing targets, but you've actually failed to meet the housing target that you set under the London Plan of building 52,000 homes a year. You've only built 37,000. What are you going to do differently, again, to prove that you can meet this target of homes that are so desperately needed? I
was raised in a council estate. I know how important genuinely affordable homes are in this great city. So we're now completing more homes in our city than any time since the 1930s, since since I've been mayor, more than 300,000 more council homes any time since the 1970s, despite the Tory government. If I'm re-elected, we're going to build 40,000 new council homes, 6,000 new rent control homes, and Keir Starmer's promised, if Labour wins the general election, 1.5 million homes in the first term, a big chunk coming to London. At the same time, I'm going to stand up for renters even more. We're going to pay the legal fees of those tenants who are treated appallingly by their landlords. A new deal for renters. We're the party on the side of the renters rather than the pockets of landlords.
You mentioned rent controls. It's not a Labour policy that they're going to endorse. How are you going to bring that in when rents are looking at, what, an average £2,121 per month when the average monthly salary is £3,000 in London?
Yeah, look, Liz Truss's budget has meant mortgages have gone up by £630 on average, rents have gone up by 15 to 20%. I've got the funding for 6,000 rent control homes. I'm hoping that will persuade the government, either this one or the next one. It's really important to have rents that can be controlled. In the meantime, we're going to pay the legal fees for those tenants who have unscrupulous landlords, and also work to have pan-London licensing, so accommodation is good quality, security of tenure, and rents Londoners can afford.
Lastly, in one sentence, why should voters who've already given you 8 years give you another 4?
If you believe in a fairer, greener, safer London, vote Labour on May the 2nd. All this is at risk with a Tory mayor who is divisive and hard right.
Sadiq Khan, we appreciate your time. Thank you.